There is a very particular style and tone to Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown, where the modern open-world racing game scene has divided itself into two camps, Forza Horizon and games that want to be Forza Horizon. Test Drive Unlimited is the outlier. It's not a game that will throw expensive cars at you as a reward for clumsily rampaging across town, but rather wants you to care about the cars that you own and renders them with meticulous attention to detail. That said, you will still get to live out the fantasy of earning and owning wild hypercars and getting into countless illegal street races on the roads of Hong Kong Island. We got to go hands-on with the game at Gamescom 2023, and while we weren't able to make our own capture, we do have a small sample of representative B-roll, which just shows like some of the game world, a little bit of more pedestrian driving through the streets of the game. Hopefully we will be able to show more of the game at some other point, but this is what we've got for now. And let's look at Hong Kong Island, because that's what the video really wants to show. Anyone whose awareness of the region is largely derived from cinema will likely be surprised at the breadth and diversity of the environment that you find within Solar Crown. Yes, you'll absolutely be racing through central Hong Kong and the maze of skyscrapers that dominate the waterfront, but so much of Hong Kong Island is outside of the main city centres. There's over 650 kilometres of road rendered in the game, and from glancing at the map, maybe 70 or even 80% of that feels like it is outside of the cities and towns. And that is also before counting the smaller trails that you'll be venturing down to hunt for collectibles, like abandoned classic cars that you want to try and rebuild and claim for your garage. We got to take plenty of that in on our whistle-stop tour of Solar Crown, but we also got to understand what it aims to be as a game. And this is essentially an MMO. It's an always online driving and racing game where everything and everyone is always connected. Online open-world racing games have become the norm in recent years, but you're typically able to play them solo first and opt into online multiplayer, with other players rendered as ghosts that you don't really have to bother and interact with. That's not really the case with Solar Crown, because every single race event that you take part in will feature matchmaking and then have AI backfilling spaces as a backup. Thankfully, your race goals and objectives will then be adjusted to suit the skill of the opponents that you're facing, but if you're used to bullying the AI and rampaging to first place in every single race and event, then you'll have another thing coming in Solar Crown. So to improve, then you'll obviously need to better your own driving skills, but you'll also need to master and get better cars. Early on in the game, you'll have a fast car, that's for certain, maybe a Nissan 370Z as I was handed the keys for, and that will have to be your workhorse as you choose to ingratiate yourself with the clan of your choice, picking between the streets and the sharps. You'll then upgrade the car with numerous parts so that it can handle greater challenges or has different attributes, but at the same time you'll be eyeing up the next purchase, the next car that will propel you to higher tiers of racing. I was then able to leap right ahead to the Koenigsegg Agera RS, with KT Racing's physics and handling model then ensuring that there's more of the raw power of such a ludicrous hypercar coming through the gamepad to your fingers and thumbs. Once you then also have to factor in the environment and the day and night cycle, which is accompanied by dynamic weather, and you'll potentially have a real handful when driving in the wet or heading off-road down a hidden path. Thankfully, you can seemingly switch things like tyres on the fly so that your car can be better suited to the conditions, but let's face it, an Agera RS is never going to be an off-road monster, so if you want to go exploring the mountains, then you'll have to pick out another car and save up to buy it. There is a great attention to detail in recreating all of the game's cars digitally, and this goes far beyond the handling model and the fully modelled exteriors and interiors. Though, having said that, you can view all of this detail in any of the game's car showrooms and even take the cars out for a quick 2-minute test drive before buying them. Some of those details include any of the convertible cars being able to have the roof opened in the moment, but in the cases where this is a motorised element, it will only do so in the same conditions as the cars would do them in real life. So you can't be racing down a motorway at 150 miles per hour and then trigger the roof to open up, because that would massively break the car. You'll have to come to a standstill or a rolling stop and then do it. Also, once you've looked in the mirror, then you can also signal before you maneuver, and while it doesn't actually do this in this particular build that we played, the lights will automatically stop blinking after you've turned. It's this kind of meticulous attention to detail that is part of this game. But really, Solar Crown is only partly about the driving, the cars and the racing. Being an MMO means that it gets to be just as much about the shared spaces and sharing that car culture in general. When you load into the game, you'll start off in your room at the fictional Solar Crown Hotel, this devastatingly imposing spire within the real-world setting. And then similarly, there are the shared spaces at the two clan headquarters, with the Sharps being set up in a posh hotel, while the streets engage in what is almost certainly an unending underground rave. Any player can visit these spaces, but each one has got an inner sanctum only accessible to members of that specific clan, and there's further access to those who rise up through the ranks, beating the 6 leaders in head-to-head races. There's also a further neat little touch which I like to highlight, and that comes from the radio. There are 6 radio stations in the game, each one with extensive playlists featuring around 10 hours of music, and that is pretty great in its own right. But the really neat trick here is that it is synced up for groups of players, so if you've buddied up with a group of friends and you're driving around town and you're all switched to the same radio station, you will hear the same music at the same time. And that kind of says it all about Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown. Yes, it's a game in which you drive and race around Hong Kong, but it's also a game that will be at its best when you engage and actively share that space with other people and players. It's not always going to be about coming first in all of the races. It's not always about the racing rivalries, because sometimes it's just nice to hang out and drive together. That's all that we've got for our hands-on impressions of Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown. The game is targeting a 2024 release, and hopefully before then we'll have much deeper hands-on, we'll have much more footage and more racing to be able to show you. Until then though, we hope you've enjoyed what you've seen, and I'd like to ask you to do the usual YouTube things, liking, subscribing, you know the drill, and hopefully we will see you again soon. Goodbye!